Hey, it's Booray from Tampa, Florida, and today on Booray Explains, I'm going to explain the rule of thirds. Up until now in this series, we've been talking about the basics of photography. We've talked about exposure, shutter speed, aperture, things like that. And before we go any further into the terms of photography and the mechanics, I thought it would be a good idea to do a video on composition. If you've watched everything up until this point, after this video, we talk about composition, and that's when you're really ready to go out and start taking pictures. If you're somebody who knows nothing about photography, if you watch every video, including this one, up to this one, after this one is when you really can start experimenting. You understand how your camera works, you understand the exposure triangle, you understand depth of field, and you understand composition. That's the basics of being a photographer. Now, here's the hard thing about learning about the rule of thirds. First of all, it's not the only rule of composition. There's other rules. There's the Fibonacci sequence and the dirty Sanchez. There's tons of rules of composition, and many of them contradict each other. And what's even more frustrating is that some of the rules contradict themselves. Like there's times you're going to see when we're working right now that the rule of thirds will actually contradict itself. And this can be frustrating. It's important to know that rules are made to be broken, and that knowing the rule doesn't mean you have to follow the rule. Sometimes the best thing to do is to break the rule. But it's a cliche, but the truth is you need to know the rule before you break it. You'll break it better if you know the rule. All right, so let's start with the basics of the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a grid that you throw across your image, and it's very easy to find this grid because most software that is used for cropping automatically will put the rule of thirds into the cropping screen. So I'm in Capture One right now, and I've got the crop screen up, and as you can see, when I go over here and I start to use my crop, you can see that it does the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is just that. It divides your picture into 3 zones horizontally and 3 zones vertically. This creates 9 boxes. So there's a lot of ways in which these boxes can be interpreted and a lot of ways in which this rule can be used on an image. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what I do and how I apply the rule of thirds to my images. The very first thing that I do with the rule of thirds is I apply the horizontal rule, the horizontal line rule, as I like to call it, or the horizon rule. If I have a horizon in my image, I want the horizon to be straight, and I want the horizon to fall right on one of the lines in the rule of thirds. So you see I have 2 horizontal lines here, and you can see in this picture, the way this picture is cropped, the horizon falls dead perfectly right on the bottom horizon line. Typically, you do not want the horizon to go through the middle of your photo because it cuts your photo into 2 distinct pieces. You want it to be either on the bottom line or the top line, right? It's pretty obvious. If we look at this photo, this one's uncropped. If I was to crop it, I would probably bring it down until right there. See, I've got the horizon right on that line, and that is where I would crop it in terms of the horizontal. And then I would move it over to here. Why here? Because of the vertical rule. The vertical rule says that if you've got an object that is vertical in your image, you usually want it to fall on one of the vertical lines. There's 2 vertical lines as well. So here I've got the horizon line on my horizontal line, and I've got the vertical people on my vertical line. And that is how I would crop that image. And sometimes it's subtle. If you look at this image, the before and after, you may not see a big difference, but believe me, the human eye detects these things. The human brain detects these things, so it's a good idea. Now, that being said, it doesn't always work. For example, let's look at this image. There's my horizon. As you can see, my horizon is a little high. Okay, so let's go here, and you'll see my horizon. If you look at my horizon line here, see, my horizon is really high. But the tricky part is, in order to get that horizon where I want it, I'm going to have to crop it way up here like this. And to put her on a line, I'm going to have to move it over, and I'm going to end up with something like that. And that's not what I want. That's cutting off her feet. There's way too much space above her head. So this isn't going to work for me at all. So what do I do? Well, if you notice where I actually have it cropped, look at the line. the bottom horizontal line, it's not on the horizon, but it is on a horizontal line that's in the image. Because if you look, there's actually two. There's a line right here where the water meets the shore. I'm sorry, there's three. And then there's a line here where the breakers are. The white water meets the dark water. And then there's finally the horizon line. So actually I am on a horizontal line. I'm kind of right there where the white water meets the dark water. As a matter of fact, I would crop this in a little bit tighter and move it up to right about there so it's dead solid. And I can't really get her on that. I can't really get her on the vertical line without losing part of the dress. I guess I could go to here. That might be a good one right there. She's vertical, right? She's on the vertical. I've got my horizontal line on a horizontal line that's in my image. Let's look at that. Yeah, that's a good crop. That's a pretty good crop. Even though technically the horizon is not on the horizontal line, the lower horizontal line, there is a horizontal line on the lower horizontal line. She's vertical. She's on the vertical line. So this is a good horizontal vertical rule of thirds crop. All right, so that's the first thing I do to any image that I'm working with when I start cropping it. Does it always work? No, it doesn't. Look at this image. See? There's my horizon. It goes right through the middle of my image. But guess what? There's just no way to fix it. There's nothing I can do. I have to work with what I have. And so as a result, I'm going to have this image that is almost dead solid horizon right in the middle of the image. Sometimes it can work. Sometimes you're forced to do it and you don't want to do it. But you just have to work with what you've got. Here's another example of an image where I couldn't get my vertical line where I wanted it to be. I've got this big vertical line right here, and it's almost dead center, and I don't want it there. I want it on the left or I want it on the right, but I just couldn't do it. And so when I look at this picture, I think the mistake that I made here was that I didn't shoot wide enough. See, if I had shot more wide, then I could have cropped this in such a way that this line would have been over here. They would have been over on the left side of the image, and I would have had maybe some negative space over here, and that would have worked better. But as it turns out, you can't get it right every single time. And so this is just what I had to live with. And it ends up being a good picture. I like this picture, but it might have been better if I could have moved this vertical line either to the left to put it on the vertical or on the right to put it on the vertical. So let's talk about something a little more simple, like a person. Here we have a headshot, my fabulous, beautiful model. This is back when I shaved my goatee for about 6 months and the whole world exploded. I had it for about 20 years and then I shaved it and people went nuts, so I grew it back. So you've got a picture of a person. How am I going to work with this? What about my vertical lines? What about my horizontal lines? Well, this is when you start talking about your PowerPoints. What's a PowerPoint? When you look at your lines, you will see that they cross, right? You've got two horizontal lines, you've got two vertical lines, and they cross right in the middle, and so you've got a box right in the center. There are 4 corners to that box, 4 places where those lines cross, and those are called the PowerPoints in the rule of thirds. And one of the things that they will tell you to do is to put important things on the PowerPoint. Put them on the PowerPoint if you can. So there are many ways you can actually crop a simple headshot using the rule of thirds, using the PowerPoints, using the horizontal and the vertical. You get to decide which one you want to use and which one is more important to you. So let's start with the PowerPoints. If you take the PowerPoint and you put it on something important, which is generally the eye of your subject, right? So if I put my PowerPoint right there, that is going to be a good crop. You notice how I'm off center, a little bit to the right, but the PowerPoint is right on my eye. And that just seems to be the right place for an image. I don't know why. I feel, mentally, I don't know why that is, but it just is. Over time, scientists have determined that when a person views an image, having things on the PowerPoints tends to make the image more pleasing when you look at it. So I put my eye right on the PowerPoint, and that is a good off-center crop for this image. Doesn't have to be that way. You can also do it where you put me right on the vertical. And now the PowerPoint is in the middle of my forehead. That's not a bad crop either. That works okay. Puts me a little bit more to the right. But still, the power point is right in the middle of my forehead, which is a power point. That's where you want the eye to go. And you've got my head directly on the vertical line, which is also a nice thing from the rule of thirds. Again, these are things that you use to help you know you're right. You know, you're going to be cropping. I'm not sure. Is this right? Is this right? You're not sure. Well, are you on the vertical line? Are you on a PowerPoint? Yes. Okay, you feel better now because you know, okay, I'm doing some of the rule of thirds things, so that helps to give me some reassurance that I'm doing this correctly. And then, of course, there's just, zoom right in and dead center me, where you put everything that's important right in the middle box. And that can work, and sometimes it has to work, but if you look at the crop, it's really not a pleasing crop because everything is in the center, and there's nothing on the left and nothing on the right, which brings us to another big part of the rule of thirds. It's called the rule of thirds because the screen is broken into three pieces horizontally and three pieces vertically. And generally speaking, if you can, you want to have something in each one of those zones, both vertical and horizontal. So in this case, I don't. In this case, I've got a little bit of ear in my left and my right zones, but mostly everything's right in the center. So I've got dead space left and dead space right. And that tends to make this, it makes it static is what it does. This is a very static image. But if you move it and you put it off center and you put it on the vertical like this, it gets more motion. I know that seems weird, but it does. Your eye tracks in from left to right and then comes and settles on the face. It just has more motion, more movement to it, for lack of a better word, and it becomes a better crop and a better composition. All right, so let's take a look at one that's a little bit more tricky. So here's a picture that I took at a wedding. How am I going to crop this image? Okay, I can tell you from years of experience of working on the beach that the very first thing I do with every image is I correct the horizon. So right off the bat, I can see that there is a horizon line in this picture, and I want to correct that horizon. I want the horizon line to be straight because it's just a pet peeve of mine. I know a lot of people love to tilt their photos, but after years of working where I had a horizon behind all my subjects, it just became habit for me to always correct my horizon first. So let's bring up the crop screen and let's correct the horizon by rotating until my horizon falls right even with a line. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. Usually I just grab it and rotate it, but most of these programs actually have a tool that makes it easier. So if you go up here, let me get rid of this crop. If you go up here to this tool right here, straighten, you can just draw a line where the horizon is like that, and it'll do it for you. But I find that sometimes it's just not exactly where I want it to be, so let's see if it did. No, it did. That's a straight horizon. So that's the first thing I would do. Straighten your horizon line. Step 2, can I put that horizon line on the horizon line of my rule of thirds? Well, no, I really can't. I'd have to go like this, and that's no good, or I'd have to go up, and that's no good. So this is going to be one of those images where I'm going to break the rule of thirds in terms of the horizon. My horizon line is not going to be on a horizon line, and there's nothing I can do about that. I'm just going to have to learn with it. Okay, so step 3, the rule of thirds. Do I have things in every zone? Well, let's take a look. Well, you might think, no, you don't. You've got the people here, and they're in the right zone and the middle zone, but they're not in the left zone. Yes, but I do have something in the left zone. You see, I have this big leaf in the foreground, and this is it's a thing, right? It's not the main thing, but it is in the zone. So the image does flow. It's something in the left, something in the middle, something on the right, something on the bottom, something on the middle, something on the top. However, if you look at this, there's really not enough on the top. Bring up your thing, and you'll see you've got the edge of her hat, but there's a lot of dead space in the upper zone. The top, above the top horizon line. So I would probably bring this down to about here. And so now I've got more filling up the top area, right? So let's look at it now. There we go. That's a better crop. So now I've got something in the top zone, I've got something in the middle, I've got something in the bottom, I've got something in the left, I've got something in the middle, I've got something on the right. This is not a bad crop. This is a fine crop for this image. But it doesn't have to be the final crop. There's lots of ways you can do it. So the next thing I would consider is something called fill the frame. And this is just a general rule, and it is to fill your frame up with stuff that is interesting, stuff you want the viewer to look at. Negative space can be great. Negative space can be wonderful, but when in doubt, fill the frame, because you can't go wrong if you fill the frame. So what if I zoom in tighter and completely eliminate some of my dead zone areas? Let's go to my crop, and let's tighten way up and come up like this. I want to put in the top, in the middle, and in the bottom. Done. That's also a crop that works. Kind of a static crop, right? But it works. I've got stuff, I've filled the frame up. What if I filled the frame up even more? I think that's better. The more I eliminate my background, the more I focus on my subjects, the more interesting the image becomes. But we're not done yet. What if I fill it up even more? Still works. Maybe a little too tight, but still works. Now, let's talk about the PowerPoints. As you can see, let's take this back out to this crop right here. As you can see, the PowerPoints are not really hitting important things. You know, I've got their faces dead center in the dead center box, but the PowerPoints are not really on important things. They're not on an eye or something like that. But that's because we're not putting them off center. Using the PowerPoints on a person's eye is really for when you're putting people off center. And we're not doing that here. So the PowerPoints don't really come into play. What comes into play more is the symmetry of the image. So if you look at their hats and the left side and the right side, you'll notice that when I frame this up, I always am careful to make sure that if there's space over here outside the hat, there's also space over here outside the hat. If there's space up here that's outside the hat, that's fine, but it needs to be outside both hats. Like you wouldn't want to crop it so her hat is cut off and his hat is not cut off. You want to crop it so both of them were not cut off or both of them were cut off. So you want symmetry in your image. This is what the rule of thirds helps you with. So that's a solid crop. That works. But for me to tell a story, this is for lack of a better word, a basic crop. They're centered, there's symmetry, it fills up the frame. That's a basic crop. But if you want to take it a little bit further and use the rule of thirds to create motion, to create some sort of a story, then you have to take the crop out. Go out so that we catch this leaf. We're going to put them, say, right here, and now we're going to put the PowerPoint right there on his eye. And we're going to catch this leaf, which tells a story now. The story being that they might not know they're being observed, right? Maybe this is like a paparazzi picture. It's not a posed picture. See, the photographer was standing behind a leaf somewhere. See, I'm telling a story now. And again, you notice how I'm going to put the PowerPoint right here, right on his eye, and that crop becomes this image. And you see how this tells a story that the other image didn't tell. The other image was just guy kisses wife. This image, you know, maybe there's a little bit more candid feel to this image simply because of the leaf being in the foreground. And in both of those images, I'm using the rule of thirds, but I'm using it in different ways. And in the close crop, I had to violate the PowerPoint part of the rule of thirds in order to get the image that I wanted. See, so as you can see, there's a lot that goes into the rule of thirds. But the best advice I have for somebody who's first learning about composition and the rule of thirds is to start with the very basic parts of the rule of thirds. And by basic parts, what I mean is start simple and then build. Start with the horizon line. Do you have a horizon? If you do, try to put it on a horizon line. Try to make it straight. After that, start talking about the zones. Start talking about filling up your frame and making sure that you try and hit all the zones. And then after that, start looking at your PowerPoints. That's kind of the order that I do it, right? But again, it really depends on the picture. What's the story that you are trying to tell? Because no matter what story you're trying to tell, no matter what you're trying to do, it can almost always be improved by just using some part of the rule of thirds. There's a reason it's called the rule, because they're good rules. So usually, no matter what you're trying to do, just trying to hit one or two of the concepts of the rule of thirds will give you a better composition. All right, I hope that this was a useful video to you. And again, go back and check out the whole series, Booray Explains, because my goal is to pretty much explain everything there is to know about photography in this series. It's going to be a long series, so hang on for the ride. Be sure and check out my podcast. It's available anywhere that podcasts are found. You can also find my group on Facebook called Pro Photo Talk with Booray Perry, and you can follow me on Instagram. Please do head over to Instagram and give me a follow. Give me a like and a subscribe right here for this video, and be sure and check out all of my gear, which is available in the description. And if you end up clicking on a link there and buying a piece of my gear, I get a few dollars, and it really helps me to keep this channel alive. Thanks for watching.